Hello everyone and welcome for our weekly Platformers live stream. And today we are going to talk about an amazing topic and we are going to talk about the power of the kebab stack. So you may think about food, but it's not only food. And for us, we got today Engin Diri, a customer success architect from Pulumi that will walk us through what is the kebab stack and what is it. How are you, Engin?
I'm fine. Thanks, Guy, for the invite. I'm really excited to talk about kebab. And as you said, it's not food. It's also technology. So that's going to be awesome.
Although I would like to have a real kebab, we will stay with only the technology today. So, where are you joining us from?
Sorry, I didn't get this.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining from Germany. So if you ever been in Frankfurt, it's very close to where I'm staying. So it's 100 kilometers south of Frankfurt.
Nice.
From a hot Germany calling.
Perfect. Amazing. So maybe you can walk us through and talk a little bit about what is the kebab stack, or maybe I will interrupt you for a second. For everyone that is joining us live, feel free to post comments. You can comment on YouTube, you can comment on LinkedIn if you have any question, an idea that you want to share, anything, we are able to get this, and you can ask Engin, obviously, and myself too, but Engin is the most important person in here, live questions, so he will able to answer you. So maybe you can walk us through a little bit, what is the kebab stack?
Okay. So let's do this. And as you said, feel free to type in the comments any questions and so on, and feel free to interrupt. So let me share the screen. I think I share already the screen. So
I can see. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So before I heading to the kebab stack and talking a little bit more about the details, I just wanted to show something I found very interesting. If you worked like me in an enterprise environment many years ago in an enterprise environment and needed to order something for your infrastructure, you may be familiar with this kind of move. You ask, and that's the way you order infrastructure. You go back and forth. Hey, I would like to have this service now, or whatever ticketing system you're using, and so on. So it was always a pain to get the right stuff, and it took really long time. So when we started, for example, a project, ordering the right infrastructure was something we did very early because we knew it's going to take the time. So it was even more horrible when you had, for example, on-prem data center. Think about a huge vSphere data center, and you had to contact and ask for the right specification. So there was even a situation where we ordered infrastructure for former projects, for example, and never gave them back. So that was also a thing because there was really a black market of infrastructure going on between the development teams because you already ordered this, you never returned it to decommission, and then you reused this for the next project, for example. So as you can guess, a horrible situation and maybe not something you would like to see nowadays. So here we come now to an implementation to say, okay, how we could create a platform, how we could get the platform superpowers with the kebab stack. So that's the idea behind this. I will go a little bit more into details about the kebab stack and what the single letters stand for. So, but before, you may or may not know me. So my name is Engin Diri, and Guy already said I'm working as a customer experience architect at Pulumi. Pulumi is a company working on infrastructure as code. I love to do cloud transformation and cloud enablement, and of course, continuous everything. So I started all my journey here with cruise control and using Java and End projects to build the stuff, and then continued over Jenkins to now all the stuff you use nowadays. There are my socials, so feel free to follow me on any of the socials. I mostly post either food-related stuff or tech-related stuff. Okay.
I have to add that, Engin, you have a very important role, and you do a lot for the community by doing talks in live sessions, in meetups, everywhere around the world. So I think it's amazing to say thank you for being such avid public speaker and be able to share your knowledge with everyone in this stream, obviously, but anywhere else in the world. So thank you for that from the community all around the world.
Thank you. Yes, I try to spread the word and help people. So that's because it's already part of my DNA when you work all the time with teams. So when people ask me, hey, how we would describe your position, I always said, okay, it's like Mary Poppins. I worked before in an enterprise environment where different teams called me in different situations, talking about microservice infrastructure, containerization. Depending on where they are in their maturity level, you had a different roles to do. So I really love to help them. And then the moment you just phase out of the team or phase out of the project because you reached a level where you say, okay, now I can let the people do on their own. They maybe not continue what you created, but at least they have the idea. So I'm always happy when 40-50% of the stuff I helped them or told them stick and they just continue. So this is for me already a success because you can never get everybody 100% always be on the edge and so on. Okay, and then we come also here with this to the question of the idea. So hey, why did I create the KEBAP stack? So what was the motivation with the KEBAP stack, and what were some of the inputs I get, for example, with my work as a customer experience architect with different teams, with different customers inside Pulumi? So yes, we have a problem. Here we know from this famous quote from the movie. So what could be the situation? So I built now here a typical a typical pipeline where we say, okay, this is a situation you will find, and this is something I have to say, we're getting slowly better. So things getting really, really better. But this is normally when we're looking now on enterprises, which are a little bit slower on the move. So I'm not talking here also, just to set the context, not talking here about now startups and so on. I say, okay, let's talk more about the enterprise concept where people are maybe a little bit slower in adapting newer stuff, slower to change stuff because it's not on their focus. So this is something I already always discovered in more or less details. So think about take or leave some of the parts depending on which company you are, but you always have this blocks where you say, okay, we have our operations team, or nowadays called also SRE, depending if they read the Google book and tried to replicate what Google created there. But classically, we always had this operation folks. Developers, of course, it's a term. It doesn't matter front end and so on. So it's a developer. It's a really a term you just say it, throw out like this. And of course, security people. So security were always the people with the Excel sheets coming out and throw them to you to make penetration tests and whatever. So, but in an ideal world, and in some of the cases, we had some kind of automation security going on. So I implemented in my last place, for example, Snook, and then we had a common view on security topics, and security teams could also work on blocking some of the libraries through Snook, for example. But okay, so as I said, depending on the maturity level, you have one or other things already in place. Typically, the developer is working in some kind of VSS system, and then it commit the work there depending on what flow, trunk base, whatever feature branching, and so on, depending how they work. Somehow a CI system starts, creates an artifact, do all the testing and so on. The artifact get ideally, and this is something I happily saw always in my places, somehow Nexus and Artifactory was always in place, self-hosted, and all the artifacts which got created got uploaded to Artifactory, for example, on Nexus, to then reuse in the next step, in the CD step. And here again, depending on the level, you either had Ansible running, you had Terraform, Pulumi running. Really depends again on your infrastructure you're going to deploy. Infrastructure, load testing, monitoring, as you can see. So this is a typical pipeline you should be very familiar. And now comes the thing on top of it. So we are not living now in this space where this is the space we can stay. No, there is also coming now, for example, the CNCF landscape with all the tools. This is just a view on this. So I always put this on, and sometimes people think I'm keep on bashing maybe the CNCF and so on, but it's not like this. It's just a good picture of the variety of tools. And there are tools which handle specific use cases. There are tools which handles a unique case, or even overlapping the use cases. So we come into the situation to say, hey, what's this? This is really the thing. What's going on here? What should I use? What can I use to continue here? So we have the situation, the cognitive overload of the people to say, okay, which tool do I need to choose? Because now comes also the point, in an enterprise environment, choosing a specific tool is a commitment for several years. As I said again, it's not something you can quickly revert, for example. So you have to train the people, you have to commit on this, and everything comes with this. So later on, you may become in a situation where you say, oh, this tool is not good, because you may did not do your due diligence very well, or you did not thought about a specific use case. So that's a thing. And then people shy away to make these decisions of new, maybe also postpone any modernization work, which is really, really needed, because they are completely overloaded with the possibilities you have. And this is reflected now here in the real pipelines you encounter in a company. So it's not only the one you saw at the beginning, there are now multiple ones, because there are teams which may already use the cloud, have already access, use some kind of serverless stuff. So you can see on the top left, there are lambdas and functions and ECS and Cloud Run and so on. So this is something where you have maybe a different way to deploy the stuff. And then you have the folks who already use Kubernetes, for example, and then they use Helm and need a different way to deploy, and so on, multi-cloud. So as we can see, there's much going on. So here comes the situation, we need something. So we need something to give us the way to choose to say, okay, I'm going to create an application of this type, and please create everything underneath this, because honestly, I don't want to think about this. I just want to have and now we come to the term golden path, to say, okay, I want something to consume. I want to know that somebody is taking care of the best way for the setup. We discussed the requirements, and I just can consume this.
Absolutely. Like, people, obviously they don't want to get headaches, but they also don't want to choose. They want to have the ability to run fast and do whatever they want, but basically they don't care about which infrastructure it's run on. Sometimes you do need to take that into consideration, but in a very low or small parts into designing your architecture and the infrastructure that you want to have in place. And most people just want to run their service. They don't really care if it's Kubernetes, if it's like a virtual machine, or whatever it is.
Absolutely true. That's I mean, I had sometimes a discussion, because we live now, I mean, me especially live in this kind of a bubble where I think everybody knows about subnet, and they love to find the right subnet topology and so on. But as you said, this is not true. The majority of people, developers, they want to focus on delivering value for the business. They work with the team, and they work with the stakeholders to deliver something, because to be honest, they want to make the money, they want to take care of the business. So the majority of these folks, again, not everybody, but the majority, is like, okay, I really don't care. So either here comes a situation when they're in charge of it, maybe, and this is also a big maybe, try to use something from the internet, some modules from somebody created, because they just want to get quickly over this. Or they keep copy pasting something because there's one day they created some deployment, let me say now, of a Cloud Run on Google, and then they keep on copy pasting this stuff into the new project and so on. So their situation, and yeah, because they're not really into this that much, let me say like this. There are always exceptions. Again, I had last time in Munich a big discussion with somebody coming at the booth, and I said to them, you're not getting a prize for the best infrastructure when it's working. It only gets a problem when it's not working. And that's always a big thing. So some people who are a little bit smarter than me, of course, made some nice maturity level on this and say, okay, where you are and how you should measure your journey and your maturity, and see what is the next step and how to roll out the whole idea of having some kind of platform going on. So I hope this is big enough and visible. I always put a note to make it bigger, and then I forgot it, and this stays always small as it is. So first thing, and this is something also from my experience, thank God there were some people I talked in Munich, for example, they were still on this ad hoc level, but the majority of people I met, they always they're already behind this stage. So I hope that 2024 we see the last companies moving away from this ad hoc or stay on an ad hoc because there's a specific need. Maybe they are startups and they're now just focusing on delivering now the application and not thinking so much now about the at the moment about the infrastructure and so on. But normally in an enterprise environment, I see now rarely the ad hoc thing, which is described as team doing ad hoc implementation. Everybody does it what they want to do and so on, and have different processes and so on and so on. The next step, and this is something which I really, really like, is the proof of concept. So this is something I see much more because, I work for a company who provides infrastructure as code tools. So what I see is now companies start to realize that the ad hoc situation is something which is not sustainable. We should take care of it and get rid of this and do some work around this. So there are some first DevSecOps implementations planned. There's also maybe some mentoring going on where people say, hey, this is the tools and processes we decided on, we work on. So I would like to train the people. Maybe they get somebody from extern, which helps them. And some implementations are done. And people already start also to think about, okay, what lessons did we learn? So I like the proof of concept phase very, very much because this is where we start, like in a programming example on a green field. Yes, we start now also here on the platform area. Next stage, which getting much, much more interesting now, is then how to roll this out. So the org-wide adoption. So how are we going to roll this out for all teams? And this is one of the first points we see also much friction going on. So rolling out a strategy you build is something very difficult. It can go horrible wrong if you do it wrongly, and it could be perfectly fine if done with the right steps. There was a phrase many, many years ago, and I grew up with this in the whole developer rockstar time from Atlassian. There was this phrase of culture eats strategy for breakfast, and this is something which really sticked in my head with all the years to say, okay, whatever I'm planning on the whiteboard in my head, and even if it's the fanciest GitOps stuff and fully automated, it will not fly if you're not considering the culture of your company. Which works for one company may not work for the other company if you're not considering your specific case. So here again, the org-wide adoption is one of the levels in your maturity, which maybe takes a little bit more energy because you want to succeed with the idea, and not people are like, oh, that's too clunky, or maybe getting captured in some politics because another team, another sub-organization inside the company don't want to support what you're doing. So, but think about it works, and you had an idea to roll out, and then you start also the mentoring across all the organization, how to use now your platform, to use your way, and you start also to have your implementation governed and reported. The next point is sustained and repeatable. So we say, okay, we have now a DevOps implementation. We can now, which is now well embedded into the different teams. We have also a governance going on inside the company, and we get also all the metrics as tracking and reporting. I mean, we're talking about DORA or something like this. So you get also numbers back, which you can report back and up and down to say, okay, this is the value I'm generating here. So reducing the scaffolding time from 7 days to 3 days in an enterprise environment is already a huge success. So you may not maybe get the thing you see on YouTube, like clicking and then instantly rolling out, because there's still some gated stuff going on, but you achieved something. So that's already very nice. And then we got, of course, to the optimized DevOps, where we say, okay, everything, we have a continuous feedback loop, continuous improvement, and everything goes on. This is the highest level. Okay, but just picking something out. Yeah, yes.
I have a question. Like, if you would need to, I know, like, pinpoint where you see the vast majority of teams or platforms today, where have you put that? Is it like on the optimized DevOps, or is it more on the org-wide adoption?
I see now people, and again, I can only say from my experience here at Pulumi, and when customers appear and say, hey, we are here, I see the org-wide adoption now. So there's already a great understanding of the need of DevOps, the idea of DevOps, independent who's the driver. So it could be the dev teams, it could be the ops team, it could be a mixture of this. So that the people, the champions, as we would call them, are already well aware of some of the situations they have in the company. In best case, they also have a sponsor from the top management, for example, who helps them to drive the adoption inside the company, because he opens then the door, he or she opens the door for rolling out. So I would say currently, as I said, I see most folks in my bubble in the org-wide adoption going on. Still sometimes proof of concept, because yes, we are two, so they pop by because they choose the tool and they want to continue because they made now a proof of concept. So how is your experience in?
Yeah, I have to say that I think most organizations are from worldwide adoption, moving into trying to be more sustained and repeatable.
Yeah.
But the main challenge with it is that you need to put a lot of efforts in that. So it depends on the size of the company and the growth of the company, in the level and the talent you have in the company in order to move there. So you need the motivation, like, do I a big competitor in the market and I need my engineer to work fast, or do I'm like good enough with the current situation I have? But I have to say, I think that most of the people are, as I see it, right? It's only in my eyes and your eyes. It's not something that we see a lot. Is on the all wide adoption, moving or trying to be unsustainable and repeatable. And I think that what we're trying to do in here, by the way, in the platformers is in the live stream is trying to bring more stories for people moving to optimized or moving into further down the line to see what are the lessons learned that you can take from them, because they invest a lot in order to be there and they learned a lot of lessons to be on the optimized. How do you get and what do you learn from them in order to make yourself much more efficient?
Absolutely. And always a big fan of data driven and say, okay, also of experience inside the company, because again, it's not that difficult to take something which works in company A and just take it one-on-one. So that's the thing I learned on a hard way. But I picked out now the sustained and repeatable part and say, okay, for me, this is platform engineering. So this stage, from this point on, we're talking about platform engineering, because we want to sustain this DevOps implementation across different teams. And we also start to track and report and also have some kind of governance going on. That could be the platform and a team. It could be a whole working group altogether. Again, it depends how to implement this, but here it starts. So one definition, again, don't add me on this one. This is just my understanding. Again, this topic is something everybody, and this is correct like this. Everybody has his own understanding. So for me, platform engineering is a practice of building and operating a common platform as a product for technology teams. So this is my definition. And now, of course, we come, as you said, also to the point, okay, how to build a successful platform. So again, and I'm a huge fan of this, and to say, okay, you need to understand your customers. And most of the people are then on this place, or to give it a little bit more expression here, because listening to folks is really, really difficult. So there's a tendency sometimes to just quickly jump into an implementation or have this ivory tower going on. So I talked again with different, when I'm always at the booth, I love to talk to people how they do things in their world. And I always see some tendency of people are like, yeah, it's forbidden this, it's forbidden that. And we give them, you know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, I don't know. That feels like, okay, maybe the customers want this, but sometimes, again, I have to be careful with my wording to say, okay, don't let the platform drift away into some closed thing. So it's very, very important to have a good understanding, a good connection. So there are some folks in the infrastructure space who talk about infrastructure as a product, who say, okay, we have to think about now creating the platform is one thing. So technology, everybody is capable to create technology something. But how to make it successful and how to get this interhuman work going on, and how to work, how to think as a product team, and how to work with releases, to communicate with your internal customers. So that's really, really a huge thing. So everything can fall apart when it comes to understand what your customers are looking for. So what are the responsibilities as a platform engineer? As a platform engineer, that's a good question. Say, okay, we understood. Okay, there's a maturity level. There are different different levels we would like to achieve, and we also, because Engin put a nice GIF inside of a crying person, is like, okay, I need also to understand. But what are some of the responsibilities I would like to have? So, as a platform engineer, I'm, of course, in charge here designing and implementing the infrastructure. There's something very, very important to say, okay, I need now to get hands-on and to build the stuff. The other thing is I need to automate the application. I mean, again, there's some examples. Of course, there are some additional stuff going on. I just picked now some points here. Automating the application deployment process, that's very important, because I don't want to have any manual things going on when deploying the stuff. So no SCP upload via WinSCP or whatever. So creating a deployment process. And now comes one of the points I found interesting, also to provide troubleshooting support. And now comes also the point to say, okay, if I create a platform and I create a way people can create infrastructure and deploy their applications in a specific way, I'm going to support also this specific way. So everything which maybe falls apart, because this is still necessary. In another talk, I had a discussion about this to say, okay, we don't want to limit folks, because we want to gain from the innovation drive from folks, and maybe they feed you back. They say, hey, I broke out of your supported way. I understand that this is not supported anymore. I'm not calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning because I changed so massively your supported way. But we see that people like this, and maybe we take this now and put it also in our how do you say this, in our supported golden path, for example. So providing troubleshooting support is very important. Could be different levels. I had a talk where people had really a dedicated support team going on for their platform, which I also very much liked. So this is already a huge maturity level. Yes, it was a bank, and yes, they had the team for this. So very interesting. And additional stuff, yes, monitoring, optimizing the performance, maintaining and updating the infrastructure, and applications, and staying, and this is also very, very important, having the space, the time, and the room that you keep up to date. So being part now of the platformers of GI, for example, is one way to see how other people are doing, maybe catch a new technology and play around. So this is also very, very important.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we of course, we're not doing this. We are not an NGO, especially in an enterprise environment. We're not going to waste now money, because we need to fulfill ourselves. There's always a business benefit. So why we are doing all this work on the platform engineering? So again, some points here: reduce the toil of software development. I don't know if people using the word toil anymore, but I mentioned SRE and Google and replicating what they did many, many moons ago. Toil was a big thing. Every time when I called a colleague and so on, they keep on telling me about toil and so on. Yes, we don't want to identify with unnecessary work our work. We want to have the freedom to focus on, as I mentioned at the beginning, on delivering value for my business, and not tweaking whatever EKS or Kubernetes deployment failing, because this is taking time away, and your management will not give you any additional points for this, because you may miss to deliver an important feature. Improve engineering productivity. Again, very, very important, because with engineering productivity is measured also in money. That's very important. And some additional stuff. So provide consistency and confidence for the folks. And also very important, help scale teams. So when it's working with your platform, it's very, very easy to board on new teams, new projects, and so on. Very cool stuff. So how would look like?
I have to say that you mentioned the term toil, and it's interesting because because on the SRE book of Google, it was the main theme of the book, right? We want to reduce the operational tolerance, but it's the first time I hear it on the terms of development and platform engineering. The fact that platform engineering can reduce, I wouldn't call that software development toil, but something like more infrastructure toil for software developers, because they need to pay or they need to spend some time and resources with the or with the infrastructure teams or with some kind of infrastructure which is not their focus and not their plan.
Absolutely. I mean, this again, two views. You have two heads now on to say, yes, of course, there was also a situation where where development teams had to do something when bundling and so on the application, because they knew the best how to build with Grunt or whatever they used, Maven, to create the stuff. So they had also maybe some stuff on their side to prepare the deliverable in a way that then it could be deployed on whatever system. So it's a two thing. But yeah, generally, people should avoid to do unnecessary work which could be automated and so on, and see it, worst case, see it as part of my working agenda to say, hey, that's what I'm doing. I'm the person who, I mean, when I worked in the insurance company, we had a colleague, his name was Tonoku, and his only job at this company was to create deployment packages to deploy on the different servers in the insurance company. So we started a project called Otonoku, so automating Tanoku. That was really a nice project because we really wanted to give him the freedom to do something else. So the project Otonoku was then to eliminate this unnecessary manual work of this person, to give him the space to do something else. And then he had the space to do something else. And Otonoku was a very cool project, just to give an idea. Okay, so platform. So this is now a way we say now, okay, everybody, the platform engineering team, the new created platform engineering team creates now or builds services. And the development, again, it's a broad term, developer term. So people just consume the service, and they're all using now the platform, which has which is built of different layers with a huge layer of automation. Then we have the infrastructure operation part and DevOps part. Security is also important. And then we see also some of the characteristica we would like to have. I mentioned this also in some side sentences of me. The flexibility. So we would like that the system is flexible. We would like that the system is extensible, because nothing is worse because we see how quick the heartbeat is going. So when we say we want to stay ahead and want to gain maybe the benefits, the system should not be built that it's not easy extensible. It should be cloud agnostic. Again, big word, cloud agnostic could be necessary for some people. Sometimes I'm like, okay, if you have no need maybe for this, so maybe it's not that important to hide anything behind some kind of abstraction, to say, okay, then it is as it is. And composable, that's something. So, and then we come to the point to say, yeah, that's platform engineering. So we are really got there. And now we can come to the point we just met today. So what could be a reference implementation? There are many reference implementation out of it. And there was one of the other solves a specific point, more generic and so on. So I also see the need, for example, to implement, in my case, a collection of different tools. So this is a situation, the KEBAP stack is born. And I will come a little bit more into detail of the name, because probably everybody is asking, what is this? Depending on where you are from. So let me say like this. So this is the thing when I'm presenting the KEBAP stack here in Europe, for example. So yes, please don't, the B and P, it's always a big discussion depending where you are. So think about KEBAP now as a P. So yes, it's a nice food. It's people know this, be it vegetarian or with meat, doesn't matter. So the doner kebab is something very known, especially if you're in Berlin, the birthplace of the doner kebab. So every European was like this when I presented this. They found it very funny and interesting, and so. But when I presented it to the Americans, they're like, "What? what is a kebab? So depending on the people traveling much or not, and so on. So, but again, most of the people did not understand the joke behind the kebab stack, and I was like, oh my god, I should maybe have called it the El Pastor stack or something like this. First, I maybe had more letters to use because El Pastor has more letters, yeah. But
it's a really good Mediterranean name. I have to say, you have to stay with the kebab stack.
Yeah,
And
the
maybe
kebab
we'll
stack.
bring kebab to the US so people would know it better.
Absolutely. I've also thought about shawarma, but then there's no K for Kubernetes. But now we come to the letter, so I'm like, that's not working. Okay, but yeah, so that's typical direction I get across the pond. But it's funny, and I'm also here to tell people about culinary things. So, okay, so let's take out the reference implementation here. No, the white paper from the tech app delivery. Highly suggest, if you did not knew about this, please go to the site of the tech app delivery. They're doing great. You can work there also. You can contribute your experiences to them also. So it's a working group from different parts of the company, different parts of different companies coming together and working here on the definition of a platform. So I took this from their webpage and say, okay, let's cut some pieces here and attach a tool to it to have something, to get some meat on the bones for our reference implementation. So everything runs here on Kubernetes. So we get the K for the kebab stack from the Kubernetes. So that's our runtime. So the kebab stack is really something which needs Kubernetes, which is fine. I mean, there's the big discussion to say, okay, Kubernetes is the control plane. It's the single point where we define all our infrastructure, everything related to the platform of it. So completely fine with this. I took out here to say, okay, secrets. So I really in love with the external secrets operator. It's such a powerful tool. Running here with different cloud providers, with running from replication from secrets from one cluster to another cluster and all the stuff. So you can really create nice stuff. So awesome project. And yes, of course, there are also some other possibilities, but the external secrets operator created here really a way to consume different secret providers in your Kubernetes cluster and then still defining your declarations and roll them out. As an interface to communicate here with the customers, I use Backstage. Again, you probably heard about Backstage. You maybe did your first trials. Backstage is also a very nice tool. I like it very much. The team around Backstage, it's a CNCF project, so you have also the safeness of the CNCF behind this. No licensing stuff, no closed things going on. You can contribute. And the team is doing much to create a more declarative approach. So if you ever had Backstage many years ago, you looked at you like, I need to code stuff and so on. We're not that large to code and to implement plugins there and so on. It changed. They also have a suggestion. They changed already the backend, and they're also working on a more declarative approach for the front-end plugin stuff. So stay tuned and give Backstage another chance if you had a look many years ago, because again, the project evolved very quick. And as a delivery for everything from infrastructure and so on, I really like Argo CD here. So Argo CD, for me, again, it's point of view. I worked before with Red Hat Git OpenShift, and Argo CD was one of the main things they had already implemented. OpenShift also brought a nice UI with it, and I just saw that the observability through the UI was really something people digged and loved very much. There are other systems to roll out your workload, but I could see that Argo CD had the benefit because it gave people, even if they did not have any rights in the UI to click delete or whatever, just the observability helped a lot for people to understand Kubernetes much quicker in conjunction with the OpenShift UI, for example. It really helped me much more than having, for example, just a terminal or the kubectl CLI. So again, Argo is a really cool project. And everything which is around infrastructure, provisioning infrastructure here in this case is with Pulumi. And as a bonus, I also the kebab stack
Kebab
also
also.
has Kyverno inside. I hope you can see this. So Kyverno is also part of the kebab stack for all the things like enforcing policies, scanning artifacts, and all the stuff. So taking care that only scanned artifacts or signed artifacts can reach. Kyverno is also a great project. This is also driven with the experience because we saw that it was for folks easier to understand how to create, for example, Kyverno policies if they are coming from a non-technical world, because again, security was always some folks which may be not so deep embedded into the tech world, or they even did not have IDEs. So in my former place, the security team did not have IDEs. They did not know what Git is and so on. So when we created the story and presented, for example, some solutions, the experience was that Kyverno was very, very successful to roll out. Okay, so the clever people of you already tried to find out, hey, should it not be called kebab and not kebab because you have Kyverno double inside and so on. So yeah, think about it. The K stands for both of it. So don't be don't be too smart of it. Okay, so fast forward for the reference implementation. So how does it look like? So this is the starting point now. As I mentioned, I'm using Pulumi here. So you see the matches, the lightning. So what I'm doing with Pulumi is creating the initial hub cluster. So the cluster where the platform is running, it could be EKS, AKS, or whatever. Ignite this and install. Let me see if I can put a cool laser pointer here. Okay, and install Argo CD in the minimalist version possible, just as possible, because the first thing I do after creating the Kubernetes cluster, obtaining the kube config or the way to deploy workload is deploying Argo CD and pointing also Argo CD to the Git repository where everything else gets installed. So Argo CD gets installed minimalistically, nothing really set up on a production level, because in the Git repository, Argo CD is also defined there. So we use then everything GitOps related to manage Argo CD. Argo CD manages itself and then installs everything necessary afterwards on this. So if you want to create then your Dex setup and everything, what you have to do, you can then do this afterwards. But the initial ignition is done via Pulumi defining, installing Argo CD. Argo CD points to the GitHub to the repository with your application set of apps and whatever repository, and installing everything necessary. In my case, Backstage, Pulumi, Kubernetes operator, and the external secrets operator, and Kyverno. Okay, so yeah, we made a nice fire. That's really, really cool. And then we can start now. So everything gets installed and we come now to the first situation. So I make a first use case to say, okay, I would like, for example, because we are frugal, everybody wants to say on clouds, costs and so on. So development team A appears, goes to the Backstage UI and says, hey, I would like to order a Kubernetes cluster. They select maybe dev environment. We will see this later in the demo, how it looks like. So they select the dev environment. And in the background, Backstage creates a pull request to the Git repository, informs the operations team. Again, I choose here now a little bit the gated rollout, because some enterprises still have this requirement that folks have to look on this and has to see if everything works fine. It helps. We talked about gaining confidence. Later, you can also automate this, or you can full automate this via Backstage and say, hey, pump the stuff into the main branch and so on. And then Argo reacts on this and say, hey, there's a change. I mean, I don't need to talk about Argo. Everybody may heard the way of GitOps, so see the changes and rolls the stuff out. And I'm using vCluster to define a virtual Kubernetes cluster. And the fun part is the virtual Kubernetes cluster gets also, as you can see on the arrow here, it gets deployed. Depending, again, you could get a specific worker group node for this and so on, or with Carpenter, create a specific vCluster Carpenter pool and then deploy the stuff. Gets then attached as a spoke to the Argo CD. So now we have the possibility to automatically register via Kyverno the creation of the V cluster, and then when the V cluster is up and running, Kyverno picks up and creates automatically the spoke inside Argo, and then we can use now the deployments we will see later in more details. Of course, development team B, they want to deploy classical infrastructure or real infrastructure, whatever. It could be AKS, Kubernetes cluster, and so on, depending on the cloud provider. So again, same workflow, going to Backstage, ordering via the software catalog, ordering your specific items. Same thing, pull request to the Git repository. But here in this case, Pulumi is reacting here, the Pulumi operator, because Argo rolls out the stuff. Pulumi sees now there's a CRD of that type. Hey, I noticed that's my thing. I have to work on this now. And it's deploying now the infrastructure via Pulumi. In this case, I use Pulumi YAML. You could also use another language depending on what you want. Here, I opted here for the YAML approach. So Argo deploys the whole Pulumi program written as YAML on the cluster. The operator deploys it. And here again, the moment the cluster is up and running, it gets registered as a spoke also to Argo. And last but not least, last team comes and says, hey, I would like to deploy additional infrastructure, whatever you come up with. This is also possible. Go to Backstage, select your story, and then it starts.
Amazing. Okay. It's amazing.
Let me stop this show now and come to the demo part. So where is my... Here you are. Yeah, I hope I did not make too many awkward faces because I could not see myself and then...
No, you look terrific. You look terrific.
Okay.
So it's really interesting to see this architecture draw when you can, and I think something that is very unique is the fact that you have like Ignite one cluster that it's going to be like the hub and spoke for all the other clusters, and then everything goes from that place to the other ones. So okay.
Yeah, so that was always the idea to. That's nice. It's KEBAP. It's KEBAP. Okay. Again, here's a little bit of the code before we go to real. How could it look like? Again, I opted here now for a mono repo. You should not need to do this. I choose TypeScript for the Pulumi part. And as you can see, let me make this a little bit bigger. So defining all infrastructure here. So here comes a lot of boring infrastructure part, depending how you set up the stuff. But the real interesting part comes here, creating now your EKS cluster, which is very, very cool. And a pod identity and all the stuff. This is also very important to avoid any working here with some service account shenanigans and so on. But because I needed this in this case, I use the Argo image updater because I use the ECR, for example, and I would like that the image updater doesn't need any password from the ECR to react on any changes. So I really wanted to avoid this stuff. So creating the pod ID, you see, I mix here the service account of the image updater. And so I'm very sure that every time I upload a new image, in this case Backstage, we will see this, the image updater detects this and then rolls out the new version of Backstage, because I run Backstage on the same Kubernetes cluster. You could run it on a serverless architecture also. And here comes the point I mentioned, installing Argo CD. So I created here an object inside Pulumi because I could reuse this, for example, called Argo CD. This is something I created here. And then I just point here to the Argo initial objects YAML. And here I defined now the Argo application. I said, hey, this is the repository you need to deploy this
Engin,
stuff.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yes, of course. So,
cool.
So here, this is the way Argo is working, deploying here the Argo application. And then I define what to deploy and deploying here the teams and all the stuff. And this is something now inside the Argo CD custom component resource. As you can see, I deploy the Helm chart of Argo CD. And then after the successful deployment of Argo CD, I'm also deploying the Helm chart of the so-called Argo CD apps, where you can make the initial setup of anything, project, teams, and all the stuff. So this happens here. And then everything gets rolled out. This is the infrastructure part. And if this is, I'm not going to do this now. I already deployed everything. Second part is here. I create now the backstage deployment. Here, backstage is inside here. I set it up, all the plugins needed. So this is this part here. Again, the infrastructure creating the repository happens again with Pulumi inside TypeScript. So creating the repository, building the backstage image as Dogger, and then pushing it to the registry. So this is the parts on the Pulumi side. So I created the hub infrastructure. I took care that backstage got built and deployed. Again, this is an opinionation of me. I want to run backstage as part of the Kubernetes cluster. Again, you could do this also differently. And the other part happens here all in the GitOps folders and the templates folders. So let's see, how does it look like? So where are you? Have a look in there. Okay, that should enough to do this. So when everything is deployed, you can see cluster is up and running. Everything is installed. And if we have a look into Argo CD now, so let me take this out here. So this is how Argo CD is now deployed. We have here the app of apps folder. I created also an app of clusters. Sorry, it's a little bit small. We have the app of teams, where I defined all the teams and so on. So everything gets neatly rolled out. Argo CD is here. We can see the image updater is deployed. We can see that backstage is deployed. That's very, very cool. When we go to the details, we see the annotations. So yeah, here's the digest of the backstage image already annotated and deployed. So that's what I mentioned with the image updater, nice and neatly in the system. Okay, that's one part. So this is all up and running. And as you can see, everything is up and running. So now we head over to our backstage. So backstage also up and running. And now I can go to my create, and I see here now some of the templates. So we see I created here now a Kubernetes cluster for docs. So depending on the level of how you create your software template, it could be very low level because it's needed, or it could be whole stories to say, okay, I want to create a microservice on Kubernetes. I just use a reference to the existing infrastructure, but it will create me a GitHub repository, GitHub actions, and also the application set to deploy. So that's a bigger thing, or creating here a V cluster. So let's do this. So I come here.
I would just mention we got some questions from Carlos on the chat. We will answer them after the demo.
Yeah, yeah. So we're not blowing the live stream a little bit up. So my V cluster, I select a stage. Again, the input fields are completely up to you, what you would like to ask your folks. And here again, I say I'm the development team B. So I can review this. So I now creating. I don't know why this error message is always coming. There is no error message, so please ignore this one. So I see the pull request is now created. I can see now the deployment first. I see there's a backstage resource, and then here's the application. I see the target revision. The V cluster gets deployed. Very, very good. Okay, and then I can say that's fine. So let's approve this because we are YOLO, squash and merge. That makes absolutely sense. So let's head back to kick the story. I don't have any event notifications going on, so I will kick this now by hand. Where is my V cluster? Here. Come on. There should be a change now. Yeah, so we see now. Come on, don't make my...
Maybe just deploying it currently.
The building. What's going on now? it was clear that when you do a demo,
it will always fail 100%.
it will always fail when you do a demo. Okay, but we see that the stuff is rolled out now. We see the myv cluster dev for development team B is rolled out. That's fine. Everything is deployed. And when we look here inside our deployment, we see now here my vCluster dev for development team B is also deployed. Awesome. And let's see into the cluster. And we see that the vCluster is also deployed as a spoke cluster. That's what I mentioned. We see here some capabilities. So now I can use application set controller to define depending on the capability, I can roll out now on a large scale as part of a fleet management. I can now roll out applications not on specific clusters because we're not thinking anymore about cluster. We're thinking now about fleets. Doesn't matter how many clusters are there. If I say, please deploy this application to all the clusters with these capabilities, then please go. So this is the thing. Set it up, and we should see also, yep, successful. 129 is also deployed. Cluster is up and running. So that's also fine. I have to check here the thing. And if now the development team comes back and say, hey, I would like to deploy a Helm chart, could be a specific one. So let me say pod info, blah, blah, blah. I say I'm the team, select the stage deployment. We say Stefan Prodan, we say pod info, we say this version, say review, create. Again, it creates a pull request. We go to the PR. We see now application set gets deployed, very important. And we see now the cluster selector here goes for this environment. This is what I picked through this. I say, hey, roll out this application to every cluster with these capabilities. Again, you can fine tune this. So we say, yes, that's good. Squash and commit, confirm. So while this is doing its magic, I can also show here the ordering of a real cluster. So here for the Kubernetes cluster, I use DigitalOcean Kubernetes cluster. Again, same questions you could ask. You could make it as deep as you would like, depending on your use case. And same procedure, it gets deployed. I already created it here. As you can see, my docs cluster. So it created here the Pulumi program. If we look on this, this is the Pulumi program to deploy in YAML. Everything is written in YAML. And it also gets deployed. Let me see if this is... so when we go into the cluster, we see the doc cluster is the DigitalOcean cluster is also assigned as hub and spoke. Heading back, amazing. Let's hope that it's worked to get the story done. I'm using here stupid port forwarding. So let's see if the pod info, where are you? Here's the app. So you see pod info is rolled out on the cluster. The deployment is there. And yeah, as I wish. So the deployment is here. And then I could see if I had activated logs and so on, the state of it. I could download the kube config for the, how do you say this, for the DigitalOcean cluster, but you have to believe me that this is now up and running and working. So we see it's finally deployed. And this is the way I deployed now applications on a self-service. I deployed everything on a self-service, and now it's only up to my imagination of the stories I would to proceed and I would to expose to people, but everything itself is nicely working.
Amazing. It's amazing how you can, like, with the KEBAP stack, like, to create the clusters, the infrastructure themselves, and then the application on top of that, and everything really glued together to make it work, like, pretty out of the box, which is kind of awesome. I really like that.
That's cool. Thanks that you like it. Yeah, it was a requirement of the people to say, I mean, again, I'm coming from Pulumi, so I have, of course, showing you the Pulumi way. And it was a requirement to say, okay, how we can create now a modern infrastructure with using as much as possible capabilities from the CNCF landscape, and also showing that it's working. So that's the thing.
Sure, we have a few questions from the audience. So Carlos Santana asked, can the Pulumi operator reconcile TypeScript stack?
Yes, of course. I mean, you can define. I mean, what I did here is like I wanted to give people the experience of a similar experience like you could get, for example, with Crossplane, to say, okay, I want to have everything defined in YAML and then deployed. But of course, you could also say we have different teams providing infrastructure. The database team maybe only use Python. I cannot get them into creating a YAML and so on. You could create now the YAML definition in the operator to point to a Git repository. So what would the operator do? Go to this Git repository, check it out, and then execute the Pulumi code there. So, but I didn't want to now make it too detailed on this area. But yeah, if you would like, you can also point to Pulumi programs written in the specific Pulumi language.
Amazing. And another question from Carlos, like, is it better to use Pulumi or Argo CD for deploying Helm charts? For example, deploying Argo CD itself. I guess it's more related to the bootstrap of Argo CD on the cluster.
Yeah, I mean, that's also an interesting question. So we have customers who are completely stay in the Pulumi story, who say, I am deploy every Helm chart inside Pulumi in my Pulumi program. Again, I wanted here to pick up a little bit the way for the GitOps approach and say, okay, I reduce everything on a minimum for Pulumi deploying Helm charts in code. What I did also, I did not show this, for example, I put the version on ignore. So if I run a reconciliation on Pulumi, for example, every day to see that there's no infrastructure change, it would not re-roll Argo back to the older version I created there. So because it could be that the team managing Argo CD and using everything in the GitOps repository already updated inside the GitOps repository Argo and may not synced it back to the infrastructure repository or to the initial version we used to Ignite, for example. There could be a way to maybe have a feedback in this repository, create a pull request there.
Yeah, so maybe it can be useful. Depends on the case. So, Engin, first of all, thank you very much for joining and sharing like all your platform engineering thoughts, insights, and your imagination around how can we measure that and where we should go to, and also like for developing and sharing the KEBAP stack with us. I guess people really want to have dinner now after seeing the KEBAP stack. So thank you for joining and thank you for everything you do for the community. I have to say that if people want to meet us, Engin and myself, and next week we will be at Berlin for a meetup. So let me share this meetup.
And I invite you to a KEBAP then. So if you want to come and say, hey, use the code we put here now, KEBAP 2, then when you told me at our meetups, KEBAP 2, I'm going to invite you for some nice Berlin KEBAP.
So you would use the secret board. We put it on the comments. So if you're living in Berlin and you want to join, feel free. I'm looking for a good Turkish place to eat too. So
yeah.
So Engin, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us on this live stream. Next week we are having a week off, but the week after we are going to talk about Inspector Gadget and deep dive into what is Inspector Gadget and how to work with it. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Engin, for this live stream, and see you the week after next week.
See ya. Bye.
Bye everyone.